All right, well, it's 10:01, so while everyone else is joining us, I'd like to welcome those of you who are here. Good morning. My name is Beth Rossner. I'm the acting CEO here at the Berkeley Chamber, and my colleague Andy Godwin, our Director of Events, is with us as well. I'd like to thank you for joining us. This is our fourth session of Berkeley Business Bootcamp, thanks in part to a generous sponsorship from the Berkeley Public Library. I would like to introduce Jeff Finley from the library to everybody. He's going to take just a few moments to tell us about some available resources that they have. Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you, Beth. Thank you, Beth, and welcome everyone. I thank you all for joining us. In addition to thanking the Chamber of Commerce, which is a fabulous community resource, in particular Beth and Andy over at the Chamber, I want to thank the Friends of the Public Library for funding us so we can partner with agencies such as the Chamber of Commerce. Just so you know, those of you who found your way here, in about 4 weeks, and in about 8 weeks, we have another installment to this. And I just want to make a plug for the Berkeley Public Library. We do have resources for the business community, and we also have things for every age group. Check out our website, berkeleypubliclibrary.org. Go to our calendar. You could sign up for our newsletter, and there are great programs. We just had Yan Can Cook last month, for those of you who remember him. And we have, yoga for children today, if you have a child who wants to de-stress. And with that, I'm going to turn this over back to Beth.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I encourage everyone to sign up for their newsletter and follow them on social media. They always have lots of fun activities going on. So today we're going to be discussing HR basics and some laws that everyone needs to be aware of. So I'd like to thank our speaker today, Sara Skowronski, and I will turn it over to her. Thank you, Sara. Take it away.
Great, thank you. Let me just get this started. Oops. And so thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. So today, I want to make sure everybody can see my screen. Can everybody? Great. All right. So, so what I wanted to do today, we have a very short time to talk about a really big topic. And so I'm going to kind of clip along, but I also want to make sure that everybody feels that they're getting the information they need. So it's kind of broken down into 3 sections. So after each section, if you want to ask any questions, you can put them in the Q&A, and Andy will monitor that and make sure that we're getting those answered for you. Just a little bit about me so you know why I'm here. I've been in HR for over 20 years now, working in a variety of different fields, but mainly in small businesses. And when I left the corporate world, I decided to focus really on the small business, the companies that aren't ready to have a full-time HR person on staff, and make sure that they had the HR support that they needed. So our company works just with businesses that are getting started with employees up to about 50 employees, and how do you maneuver through all of these laws that there are not only federally but in California especially, and making sure that you have what you need. I will say there is a lot to cover in HR, and so we're going to kind of do the super high level overview. We're going to talk about a little bit about compliance, something specific with COVID-19, some things that are new for 2021. And then a big part of being having success with employees is actually learning how to manage and how to work with those employees. So I wanted to spend some time talking about that as well. At the end of the session, I will have a special offer for the people that are watching or participating, and since you are here, you'll be able to take part. You'll be able to participate in that. But let's get started with compliance. Specifically, we're going to talk about laws, policies, and payroll. So the laws that are out there are numerous. We're going to first talk about the employee versus independent contractor. This has been a huge issue. A lot of people like to have people come in and work for them. They have them as an independent contractor. And the problem with this is that the government wants to make sure that the people that are working for you are protected. And that they get all the protections of the employee. They want to make sure that the employee gets time off as required, and they want, honestly, to make sure that they get their taxes. So the government really wants to make sure that an independent contractor is truly an independent contractor. And a couple years ago, they passed AB 5, which redefined how we think about independent contractors. And what that did was broke it down into what's called the ABC test. And the ABC test is making sure that a worker is completely free of control of the employer, and that they are able to do the same type of work outside of that employer's work, and to make sure that it's a trade or something that's customarily an independent contractor. So the independent contractor is really now falling into the plumbers and the contractors and the people that are working in something outside of what you normally are doing as a business. The employee needs to be covered, and they need to, if they're doing whatever needs to happen from like if you have an employee who's doing administrative work, who's doing clerical work, if you have an employee who you are telling when to show up and what time to be there, and you're giving more guidance, if you're telling them what to do and how to do them, if you're giving them the tools to do that, that is an employee. And the important thing to remember, I have a lot of clients who say, well, I only have somebody working for me for 5 hours a week, and so I just want them to be an independent contractor. And it doesn't matter whether they work for you 1 hour a week or 40 hours a week or more than that. If they are defined as an employee, they need to be treated as an employee. And so it's really, really important to realize that just because they're an employee doesn't mean you're guaranteeing them full-time work. But it does mean that you're guaranteeing that they're getting minimum wage, that they're getting overtime if they've earned that, and that you're paying taxes on their behalf and paying into taxes on their behalf. Again, all of the laws come with consequences if you don't follow the law, and they can get very expensive. And so you don't want to suddenly have an audit come through that says, this person should have been an employee, you had them as an independent contractor, and now you're responsible not only for potentially overtime and penalties for missed wages, but also for not only your portion of their taxes, but the employee's portion of the taxes. So it can be very costly not to categorize these people correctly. The second one that's a big item is exempt versus non-exempt, and this is the FLSA. And again, people find it very easy to have their employees set up as exempt employees, because then they can just pay them the same amount every week. They don't have to track their hours. They don't have to track overtime. The employee doesn't have to do a timesheet. And I have so many employees are just like, I don't want to do a timesheet. It's cumbersome. But again, if you have an employee who is not an exempt employee, and there are criteria for exempt, and I'll go through some of those, but if you have an employee who is not an exempt employee and you're categorizing them as an exempt employee, again, you can fall back and be responsible for overtime, for missed meal periods, and missed rest breaks. And all of those things come with penalties. When you're looking at an exempt employee, it has to be someone who is usually in some type of professional or managerial position. And so again, if you have an executive assistant working for you, just because you give them a title of something, have executive or have manager in their title, that doesn't count for exempt versus non-exempt. The exempt status really goes into what the job description is and what the job duties are. So you'll hear sometimes that you have, in a retail store, you might have a store manager, but 50% or more of their time is spent actually doing retail selling. So that is not going to be an exempt position. If they're spending more time on things that are not exempt or not managerial, then you're not going to be considered exempt. The other thing to keep in mind, along with all of the requirements for the job duties, with an exempt employee, you have to make sure that you're paying them an exempt salary. And an exempt salary is 2 times minimum wage. And so right now, luckily, or not, I mean, the California minimum wage is going up, but it's based on the state minimum wage, not on the city or location minimum wage. So right now, the minimum that an exempt employee can make is $54,000 a year, $54,080 per year. Again, if you have a part-time manager working for you and you want to consider them exempt, you still have to pay them $54,000 and $54,080 per year. So again, you want to make sure if you're paying them less than that 54,000, and that's only if you have 10 or less employees. If you have more than that, then it goes into the higher bracket. So make sure that the salary is meeting that threshold as well as the job duties. The next thing with laws is the required documents. Generally in federal terms, you have to have your I-9s, you have to have your W-4s. And then for local ordinances, there's for California, there is the wage notice, which is Labor Code 2810. You'll hear it called the 2810 form sometimes, or wage notice. And that outlines the employees' hourly rates as well as the overtime, what type of sick leave they have, and what type of workers' comp you have, how they can contact workers' comp. And then for some cities such as Berkeley, there's also the notice for sick leave that where they can authorize who is their sick leave person. So if they need to take time off for somebody other than themselves and they don't have a family member, they can actually say, okay, I'm going to say that I'm going to be able to take time off for my roommate or for my partner. And so you have to make sure that they're filling out that form each year as well. And then the last thing that I'm going to cover on laws, and this is just a little tiny bite size of legal information here, but is the required leaves of absence. And we're going to go a little bit more into this when we go into new laws for 2021, but required leaves of absence, make sure that you have a sick leave policy set up. If you don't need to have a vacation policy, you don't even actually have to offer holiday pay or holiday time off, but you do have to offer sick leave in Berkeley and in California. There's also a number of other leaves that you have to allow for, including victims of violent crimes, military leaves, and now if you have more than 5 employees, you have to offer the California Family Rights Act, which is SPHR, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the 2021 laws. But but these are things that are required by law. Most of them do not require that you pay the employees. They just require that you protect their job and protect their benefits if you're offering benefits to them.
Why?
All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is policies. And the baseline for all policies is your employee handbook. And this is something that having a handbook in place, having everything defined, really helps when somebody says, do we get this day off? What is our policy around this? Do we have to do, you know, what are you requiring
Oh,
people to do? And so I think the employee handbook gives you that baseline. So even in HR, even, you know, we're dealing with multiple clients right now. And when our clients come to us and they say, what is our policy for X, Y, and Z, we will pull out their handbook and we will say, this is what you decided your policy was. And some things, there's policies that are legally required, such as equal employment opportunity, non-discrimination, non-harassment. But then there's policies like time off policies. You know, you have, like I said, you don't have to have a vacation policy, but when you have these policies, when you decide to have them, you want to make sure that you're very clear on what the policy is, so that you're not treating one person one way and another person another way. And that's where you all of a sudden you come into discrimination issues. And so having that baseline with the handbook is very helpful to define those, to define what you want to do. The next section for policies, like I discussed, is the time off policy. And again, vacation and paid time off and holidays, they're not required, but once you have them, you have to make sure that you are following some rules. So for example, with vacation, you need to make sure that you don't have a use it or lose it policy. You are required to either, once somebody earns vacation, once they accrue it, it is considered compensation. And so you need to make sure that there's some way that that vacation either can get rolled over or paid out each year. A paid time off policy is a combination of vacation and sick leave. And so in general, because sick leave is a required policy under both Berkeley and California, the paid time off needs to meet requirements, needs to meet the minimum requirements that the sick leave policy would have. So if you're required to offer a minimum of 48 hours accrual time, then that paid time off has to meet that minimum. And it has to meet the same minimums of starting to accrue on the first day. Whereas a vacation time, if you had a separate vacation policy, you might not accrue until after 90 days or after 6 months. Paid time off is also treated like vacation in that it is considered compensation. So now once you are accruing paid time off for somebody, they can't lose it, and it has to get paid out at some point, whether it's paid out when they take time off or it's paid out when they leave the company. And then the last thing for policies to discuss is things to protect your business. And these are the policies that are usually within the handbook, or they might be a separate standalone policy that is addressed in the handbook, but you have people sign off on them. And these are things like non-disclosure agreements, intellectual property, physical property. These are things that you want to keep in place to make sure that you're protecting your business and protecting the information within your business. A lot of times there's confidentiality clauses. Keep in mind, in California, you cannot have a non-compete policy, and you cannot have a non-compete agreement. They're not enforceable. But you can have things that say that they can't take customer lists, or they can't take information, or they can't take documents. Those are okay to do. So you want to be able to make sure that you're protecting your business in ways that you can legally and enforceably in California. And then the last section under this first part is payroll. And again, anytime something happens with payroll, anytime something is wrong with payroll, you will hear about it. Employees want to get paid, they want to get paid correctly. And they will suddenly know every single law there is out there if it has to do with payroll. So make sure that you are keeping, for hourly employees and for non-exempt employees, they have to keep a time record. And again, this is something that people find cumbersome and they don't like to do it, but this has to be done. It has to be done by the employee. It should not be done by a manager saying, oh yeah, the employee showed up at this time and left at this time. The employee needs to actually record the hours that they worked. Because meal breaks are required in California, they need to be saying when they started their meal break and when they ended their meal break. Keep in mind that if you were to go to any kind of legal issue around timekeeping and meal breaks, a judge or somebody looking at a timesheet that says that the person started their meal break at exactly 12 o'clock every single day would be suspect. So you want it to be realistic. Did they really leave at 12 o'clock every day? Or did they leave at 11:55 one day and did they leave at 12:05 the next day? The other thing is that meal breaks have to be 30 minutes. If they come back and they mark that they were less than 30 minutes, even if it was like 28 minutes, that's not the minimum under California law. And they would actually have to get which is the next thing below that, the missed break penalty. So if an employee does not complete their entire meal break or misses their meal break altogether, or if they don't take their meal break by the beginning of the 6th hour, or by the beginning of the 5th hour, if they've worked more than 6 hours, then they're due a meal break penalty, which is 1 hour of pay. That's not regular compensation, it's just a 1 hour of pay. You also want to make sure that you're calculating overtime correctly. So over 8 hours in one day, over 40 hours in 1 week. If they work 7 days, there are all kinds of laws around overtime. I spent many hours trying to help calculate overtime when people are working over the course of the 7-day period. And then the check stubs, there are actually 10 items that are required to be on every check stub. And it is the employer's responsibility to make sure those 10 items are actually there. Payroll companies say they're in compliance. Even big payroll companies say they're in compliance. But unless you know what those 10 items are and you don't have them and ask them to turn them on if they're not there, then it's on you as the employer that those items are missing. And I'll go through them really quickly, but we can definitely talk about this, and this is something we go through with our clients. But making sure that your gross wages are on there, the total hours worked by an employee. If you have piece rate, those units, the number of piece rate units should be on there. Any deductions should be on there. Their net wages, the pay period beginning and ending date. The employee's full name and the last 4 digits of the social security number, the employer's legal company name and address, any hourly rates during the pay period. So if they have multiple hourly rates, those need to be defined on there. And then the number of days of sick leave accrued and available for the employee. And I know that there are some payroll systems that say they cannot, they are unable to have some of those items on there. So make sure that you have all those items on there. All right.
It looks like we have a couple of questions real quick.
Yes, perfect timing.
One is, hi, this is from Anna. Not sure if you will review this later, but I'm curious what the general rules are for unpaid interns.
So unpaid interns, you have to be really careful. They, in order for them to be unpaid, they need to be they need to be learning something. So you cannot have an intern come in and do sort of administrative work or the things that nobody else wants to do. Basically, having an unpaid intern needs to be an inconvenience to the employer. They need to be sitting next to somebody. They need to be learning something. There needs to be regular check-ins where they're going over what was learned, and they need to be they need to be kind of have a syllabus of what the plan is, and a review at the end. The safest thing to do and what we recommend is pay them minimum wage for whatever time, because if it shows at all that they were doing any kind of work, then you could get into trouble for that.
Excellent. And question 2 is, our policy is to pay our workers for lunch, which is an hour. Do we have to pay more if they miss lunch?
Are they, well, if they're not taking lunch, you would need to make, so basically you're prepaying that penalty. So if they're not taking at least the minimum, you need to make sure that they're getting overtime for any overtime that they have. So if I'm understanding that correctly, so it sounds like they're taking an hour of lunch but getting paid for it. So they're sort of covering if they had a penalty, but if they, for some reason, they took less than an hour, and so now time falls into overtime, you need to make sure that that's in compliance. Anything else?
That's it so far.
Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to move into is some of the new things that have come up. First of all, with COVID-19 and some of the laws around that, the FFCRA is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. This was actually the very first thing that came out in March of last year, when everything went into lockdown. It went into effect on April 1st. And what it offered is paid time off for taking care of yourself or a family member if there is either an issue where they've been exposed to COVID, where they have contracted COVID, or in some ways need to quarantine, or if they need to take care of a child who is doing distance learning and working and doing school from home. The pay from this is not from the employer. It's actually it's paid by the government through payroll tax reduction. So it's an immediate repayment of that. The first act expired on December 31st, and with the law that came out, or the new laws that came out at the end of December, it is now an optional for employers to opt into this. If an employer had employees who went out on leave in 2020, those employees have used up their time. Whatever time is used up, they don't get a new bank of it in 2021. So this is just an extension of the existing law. And it still will be a tax reduction, but the employer has the option to say whether they will or will not offer FFCRA. The other thing to keep in mind is regarding workers' comp. And COVID-19 is presumed to be work-related. So if somebody contracts COVID-19, it is presumed that it is a workers' comp claim, and you have to submit it. Now, what they're saying is that this doesn't actually mark against your experience modification rate. So there's that you don't have to worry about, but you do need to make sure that if there is any case of COVID, anybody reports that they have COVID at work, then there's a whole protocol under Cal OSHA that needs to be followed in terms of shutting down, making sure everything's cleaned, making sure, before people come back to work that, that certain people are tested. And if you have more than 3 cases, then you have to report immediately to Cal OSHA that you have a number of cases in your location. And then the last part of this is that for PPP round 2, those applications are now going out. I'm seeing a lot of emails that the banks are starting to accept applications for that. Keep in mind that you do need to show that you had in at least one quarter of between 2020 and 2019 that you had 25% less revenue in order to be eligible for those PPP funds. But there is a lot of money out there, so keep looking for it. There's a lot of opportunities that come up. And then along with everything for COVID, there was a bunch of laws that were already being added into the mix and were already in process. And the first one I talked about earlier, and that's the California Family Rights Act. And that is a mirror of the Family Medical Leave Act, which offers 12 weeks of unpaid leave for somebody to take care of their own or a family member's health issues. It is, as I said, it's unpaid, but it does protect their benefits and it protects their jobs. And so now employers with 5 or more employees have to offer the SPHR, whereas before it was 50 or more. So that's a big jump in who is now covered under that law. The second one actually it's not a brand new law, but the deadline was on January 1st, was for harassment prevention training extends to any employer with 5 or more employees, and both the supervisor and the employees need to go through training. So the supervisor still needs to go through a 2-hour training every 2 years, and the employees need to go through a 1-hour training. And there are certain stipulations to that. The training needs to be done so that the employee or the supervisor can actually talk to somebody and ask questions. There needs to be interaction with that training. So make sure whatever resource you're looking at for that training that it's meeting these requirements. There was expanded protections for victims of violent crimes. Again, there was already the ability to take time off for going to court, but now it expands to people who need to take time off for their own health care and for dealing with any kind of mental or any kind of other leave that they need to take. And then the final one, which is this kind of bizarre little thing that got thrown in there, is in general, when you talk about rest and meal breaks, the meal breaks, you've always had to allow employees to take, to be off of work, completely off of work. They can leave the work site. They can kind of go and do whatever they want during that time. But rest breaks in the past, you could require them to stay on site. As of January 1st, rest breaks can also be taken off site. So it's important to make sure that you have that ability for your clients as well. I'm sorry, for your employees. Andy, any questions about those?
No, ma'am, no questions thus far.
All right. So we're going to move into the last section here, and this is managing for success. And breaking this down into 3 different sections. One is about setting expectations. The second is deliberate communication. And the third, which is really relevant now more than ever, is managing remote employees. And so setting expectations, when I'm talking to employers and managers, it's very often there's this assumption made that because an employee has a certain job title or has had a certain job title in the past, that they know exactly what you want them to do. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. You need to be very specific with your employees when you are giving them their job duties. Don't assume that an employee understands the same things you do. There have been several times when I'm working with clients and they're ready to fire an employee. They think that the employee just isn't getting it, doesn't know what, it's just not working, and they say it's not a right fit. But when we start to dig into it and they say, well, they're not doing this and they're not doing that, and I specifically ask them, have you specifically told them to do that? And there's a long pause. And so when they do create that specific instruction, when they do break down exactly what needs to happen, we have found is that there is a complete shift. And when we go back after those conversations have happened, where we've said, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to do it, these are the metrics that we're going to govern that by, the employee now has their guidelines, and they're able to meet those guidelines, and they're able to succeed. And every time the manager has really engaged with this process, the employee has been able to turn their production around. There will be times where the person just can't make it, but once you have those metrics in place, the other side of that is that now you have something documented that says you need to complete X, Y, and Z. You need to build 10 widgets every day. You need to, whatever that expectation is, you now have it documented. You now have metrics that if they're not meeting it, you can easily say, we're going to let you go, or we're going to, whatever the consequences of that, we're going to do this because you're not meeting these expectations. And so now you've already started to build in the documentation. And I will say that if you talk to any HR person, they will tell you that if it's not documented, it didn't happen. That's probably pretty much the same as with any lawyer that you talk to. So when you're setting these expectations and you're documenting it, then you already are building in all of that backup to make a decision later on. The second thing is about deliberate communication. And so the first of this is rules of engagement, and making sure that you are determining when to communicate, where to communicate, how to communicate, making sure that you're setting up a time with your employees to check in. Being a manager is hard and it's time consuming, but if you can make the time to actually communicate, to make sure people know what they're responsible for, what they have the authority to do, and know that you're going to be following up with them and you're going to be checking in with them, so that it's not just here, this is what you need to do, and then you don't check in with them for 6 months, and then it's all gone, off the rails, but there's been no accountability. There's been no way for them to know that they've gone off the rails. Then that does not set them up for success. So setting up a consistent cadence, whether it's weekly, which is preferred, or at least monthly, of just a check-in. It doesn't have to be a long drawn out thing, but having something where you say, okay, how is this going? What's going on here? What is the next step? What are you having trouble with? So that they know that they're on the right track and that they can keep going forward. And then the last thing with managing remote teams, it includes the previous two items about, making sure you're setting expectations very clearly and having really good communication. But in addition to that, you need to, the top thing here is that you need to trust your employees. If you don't trust your employees, if they don't trust you, then having remote workers is not going to work, because you have to trust that they're going to be working during the day. But along with that is being results focused versus time and seats focused. Especially right now with everything that's going on, there are distractions at home. There are things going on. And when you expect somebody to sit in a chair at home for 8 hours, that may not be reasonable. They may have kids, they may have roommates, they may have, other things happening. And it's important to recognize that and to say, okay, well, if within an 8 hours of working, or within whatever time they're working, they're getting X amount of work done, then you're more apt to have the trust that you need. Then the last thing is having a defined lanes of responsibility and authority, making sure that the employees know what they're responsible for and what they can and can't do. So at what level can they make a decision before they have to come back to you? At what point do they need to, at what point are they working on something that somebody else should be working on? And now they're creating some friction with that remote team because you're not sure where nobody's sure who's doing what. And I will say that a business associate and I did a whole series on managing remote teams over the summer when this started. And we do have a YouTube channel, and you're welcome to if you want to dig deeper into that, you're welcome to look at that as well. But these are some of the key things that we addressed when we were going through that. Andy, are there any other questions?
Yes, ma'am. We got a question from Megan. Under the COVID-19 job leave, how would you deal with them taking leave and job protection, but you need to find someone who can fill in for them while they are on leave? Can you temporarily hire an employee?
You can temporarily hire an employee. Yes, you can hire an employee at any point for a short period of time. Again, it's unless you're going through an agency where they're an employee of record with the agency. If you're hiring somebody internally, you would want to make sure that they're an employee, not an independent contractor. But you can say at the time of hire, this is for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long the time will be.
Excellent. And then somebody else asked if you can send the link for the YouTube channel.
Yes.
We can do that at the end.
Yes.
Excellent.
Is that it?
That's it so far.
All right. Well, we're actually wrapping up here. So maybe I talked a little too fast, but I did want to offer you guys, for people who are participating today, we do offer an HR audit where we go through all of your policies. We do a review of your employee files and make sure that they have what they need. We'll go through your payroll and benefits and make sure that it has what it needs. And then that also includes 2 one-hour phone consultation, one where we're gathering information and then one where we're discussing the outcome of that. This is normally $7.95 and we're offering it to participants today for $5.95. And there's a link at the bottom. If you go to go.eoshr.com/Berkeley Bootcamp, you can purchase that. And then down here, I also have our YouTube channel here. We also did along with the Remote Strong series over the summer, we did a number of HR Power Hours where we really went into not only the FFCRA, but also some other things like employee wellness and, dealing with some issues like mental health during this really challenging time, that if you want to go back, you can watch any of those as well. But my contact information is on the screen, and I'm happy to answer. I finished up early here, so I'm happy to answer any other questions that may come up.
We have one. When you let a temporary employee go, are you responsible for unemployment?
The technical answer is yes. However, the way that unemployment works is that they actually go back to the beginning of the quarter, and then they go back a year from that, and they look at who employed that person during that time period, and that's where the funds are drawn from. So yes, but the funds may not actually be drawn from your account.
Does anyone else? Is there any kind of mentorship programs for HR managers just starting out?
I don't know specifically about HR managers. I do know that the SHRM and the NCHRA, which I think is now HR.com, they have a lot of programs and they have a lot of forums that you can work with people. But yeah, my team is always happy to talk to other HR managers, so we're happy to discuss that.
Sarah, I have a question. Do you
Yes.
Do you help people build an employee handbook from scratch?
We do. Yes.
You do.
We
Okay.
do. We have We actually have a program for the HR or for the employee handbook where we go through all of the required policies as well as all of the policies that the company wants and build that out. It's a very long conversation, but it's very fruitful in the end and very eye-opening.
Yeah, the chamber actually just redid our handbook this week, and it was very time consuming, but so eye-opening on all of the new laws and the different
Yep.
things that you need to include. So
Exactly.
it's great to know that there's a support system out there for that type of thing.
Yep.
Anybody else have
Any other questions? Feel free to chime in if anyone would like to ask a question directly. We've got a few more moments.
And while we're waiting for a question, just a little bit more about some of our services is we have the projects such as the HR audit and the handbook, but we work with a lot of our clients as an outsourced HR. So we actually take the full weight of the HR process off of employers so that they don't have to deal with the ongoing, the employee questions, the onboarding, the offboarding, the performance management. They're still involved in that because they need to be on some level and because they're part of that. But the actual management of it, we take that off of their plate so that they can focus on growing their business. Any other questions?
Yeah, and anything else? Now is your chance to talk to the pro.
Yeah, you got me free for 10 more minutes.
It's really been eye-opening. Anyone in a small business, I think it can be overwhelming when you think about all the things that go into human resources. So
yeah,
having it distilled into these 3 sections is helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah, it is. And that's one thing that part of why I founded the company is because there is so much. There's so much information, and it's not just compliance. It's not just benefits. It's just performance management. It's all of those things, and they're all happening at the same time. And it just is really overwhelming for small businesses to have to manage that much information when all I wanted to do was have this business. It's like I just wanted to open up a shop, or I just wanted to bake cookies or whatever you wanted to do, and now I've got all these other problems. So
yeah,
we try to take that off of our clients' shoulders.
Good. Question from Wendy: what happens if you decide to hire a subcontractor and not make them an employee?
What happens if you want to hire a subcontractor? Oh, you mean like what are the penalties if they're so if you decide to bring somebody on as a contractor and for some reason it's determined that they should have been an employee, then there are fines. As I said, there's the potential of having to pay overtime and taxes, both your taxes and the employee's portion of the taxes, and then there's some other penalties and fines that would come up with that. There's also the potential that there could be an audit of your workers' comp, so you'd have additional costs for that. So it's a lot of money involved. But I think when you say subcontractors, it makes me wonder if you're working with somebody who has, like, you're kind of selling a piece of a project to somebody else as a subcontractor. If they have their own business and they have their own employees and anybody working for them is an employee of theirs, then you should be okay. It's when you have that one-off person and they don't have other clients and they're not doing something that is specifically set up that they have their own kind of business growing, that you could run into problems. Did that answer the question? Anybody else?
Kathleen commented subcontractors must be licensed with CSLB. Is that something you can confirm?
Oh, are you talking about specifically with construction or?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Kathleen,
Yeah.
did you want to? Oh, yes. Kathleen is saying yes.
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
We have some employees, but at this time, oh, yes, it's a construction company.
Okay.
Yeah. Wendy, did you have any other questions? All right. Well, I think that's the last of the questions. Last call, if there are any. What to do?
All right. Well, yes, if you have anything else, again, you're welcome to either contact us for the HR audit. Also, if you go to our website, which is eoshr.com, you can sign up for a 15-minute strategy session, and that is complimentary. So you're welcome to do that if you wanted to ask any questions one-on-one and get some advice. So we do offer that as well.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah, thank you again so much for the wonderful presentation. You covered a lot in a short amount of time. And
I think people might just be overwhelmed. They didn't realize they were going to get the full HR experience in 45 minutes.
Yeah, well, if anything, it's making people aware of things that they might not have known prior to this. So you're getting lots of thank yous in the chat box.
Awesome.
I want to thank all the participants who joined us today. We will be having our 5th session next month in February. We'll be posting information about that on our website, and we'll send everybody an email with those details. So once again, thank you. Thank you to the Berkeley Public Library. Thank you to Sarah. And I look forward to seeing everybody next month. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.